Looks like it could almost have been like this from the factory. How's it going, my Saab friends? My name is Gary and this is my channel, Weakest of Weeks. If you're a first-time viewer, I appreciate you clicking on the video and definitely consider subscribing. I have a ton of Saab stuff out there, and today it is no different. Behind me, I've been wrenching away on my 08 Saab 9.3 Aero with my Fusion Blue Metallic Sabotage project car in the background, but basically I've been wrenching on this thing. You'll see upcoming here in the future, possibly you've seen it already. I'm actually filming a couple different videos all at once. It just kind of makes more sense because I had to pull off the bumper to do a lot of this work. So today's video, well, let me show you what we're working with. Here's what we have in store for today's video, and that is a budget-friendly intercooler upgrade on your 2003 to 2011/2012 Saab 9.3s. This modification will actually work on the 2.0 liter 4-cylinder versions as well as the 2.8 liter V6 like you see in today's video. And to further add to the simplicity, this modification will work with either the factory intercooler piping, or if you're like myself and upgrading it, it'll work with aftermarket intercooler piping like DO88. Difference being you have a 4-cylinder, you'll have 2¼ inch piping leading up to the intercooler. Evo 8 intercooler is 2.5, so you'll have an additional step if you have the 4-cylinder because you'll have some additional couplers on either side. So if you're wondering how to get to this point, I'll put some links in the description. I'm in the process of upgrading a multitude of different things, and it's just easiest to film all these videos at once. But I'm actually in the process of upgrading these DO88 intercooler pipes in my car. And if you're wondering why I have those pipes but not the intercooler, well, that's simply because I actually purchased these used. With that being said, a shout out to my friend Xavier. He purchased these pipes along with an intercooler, installed the intercooler in his Saab, not the charge pipes, sold the car and had the charge pipes left over. So we ended up striking a deal, and an amazing deal at that. So I'm very fortunate to install the DO88 pipes in my car. And that begs the question of what I wanted to do with the intercooler, and I thought, what would my subscribers want? And it came down to probably the most cost-effective way of upgrading the intercooler and not spending $500 or $600, and that's spending a fraction of that, 1/6 of the cost on this used Evo 8 intercooler, and it will yield similar results. Maybe not quite the same as, say, the DO88 versions, but cost for efficiency, this is going to be the best route to go. Let's go ahead and tear this car a little bit more apart and pull out that factory intercooler. So you can choose to remove this completely, or if you're like myself, you're going to take the simple route. Let's get a screwdriver, pop that open. There's one right there. There's a second one right here. And what that does, loosens up this cable right out there, and we can maneuver this out and kind of drape it back, and that'll give us plenty of access. But if you wanted to remove this thing completely, there's a little block here. It looks like mine has zip ties, but you cut the zip ties if you have them. Flip this open with the screwdriver, and then you have one cable going from the lever on inside the vehicle to pop the hood that goes to here, splits off, and then it goes to a secondary cable that runs all the way along here, and well, that's what pulls this stuff. So it's not fully required to remove that, so I'm not going to be doing that. I'm just going to loosen this up enough to basically flip this back and drape it on the engine to give us plenty of access to all this stuff here. So much room for activities. Go ahead and remove this top rubber piece that I don't think we'll be able to reuse. So looks like just kind of popped in there. Yeah, that's not too difficult to remove. Imagine this is probably the biggest pain to reinstall, but I don't think we'll need that where we're going. So that exposes the top portion of the core here, and if you notice, mine is lowered quite a bit, especially on this side. It's very loose. Well, one thing I forgot to show you is the removal of these lower pieces, and they are probably hard to see, mounted in here. And this tab of the radiator goes into this rubber isolator, and it actually is much higher than it really is, and it utilizes these E14 external Torx bolts, which are pretty rusty and crusty, and these were very rough, but I took some extra time and I used some Pour 15, some paint over rust 15 paint, and I coated a bunch of different stuff, and of course, the subframe and stuff. So it's much cleaner than it was, and that's exactly what I did on these areas. I did the contact points that were starting to rust, and of course this power steering line. For now, we'll go ahead and remove that and pull out this factory intercooler. Have a jack supporting everything from underneath. Not a bad idea to add a block of wood. We'll have to remove all these power steering line connectors. I have this one removed already. This is a 10 mil as well, and there's more on the opposite side. Going to remove the T25 Torx, fastening the AC condenser up top here to the factory intercooler. Next we have 8 mil bolts, one on each side, that fasten this intercooler to the radiator. With the hardware removed from the top, last we need to do is push in these tabs and push it up like that, and we'll have to do the same thing on the other side. Whew. So it's rather muggy, but we've made a lot of progress and not a lot of time that I'm very pleased with. Everything is now loose. Ideally, we'll be able to kind of pull this AC condenser forward, give us enough space to maneuver this intercooler from the top here. But I'm thinking, because of how the pipes are, they're angled down, I'm pretty sure that's gonna hinder us from lifting it up. I'll have to jack up the car as high as possible and maneuver this thing from the bottom. Let's give it a shot. Here it is, and you can see how thin this is, and you'll see really how thin it is in comparison to the Evo 8 one, but definitely a struggle to try to get it out the top, and pretty much it wanted to fall out the bottom, so that's what I rolled with. And here we go. It's now out. Have the intercoolers all laid out here. Of course, have the original Saab intercooler right there. And then I have two identical Mitsubishi Evo 8 intercoolers. This one I purchased off Facebook Marketplace, kind of in desperation, a little more miles on it. And I just noticed it's actually missing a bracket down here. This one I picked up shortly thereafter. This one, extreme low mile version, has all the bracketry and stuff. It's just I ended up modifying it. This one still has the lower tabs on it, where this one I ended up modifying to cut those off. Big differences visually with the two intercoolers, the two style intercoolers. The original one, a lot more surface area, but it's only 1.25 inches thick. The Evo 8 version, less surface area on the front, but thickness jumps up to nearly 3 inches. And the biggest difference coming from the fact the original has plastic end tanks, where the Evo 8 versions have the matching aluminum. Performance gains, I can't definitively say if this is in fact an upgrade or not. I mean, if anything, it's going to be better to get the end tanks because it'll hold, in theory, more boost. But if you're looking for a definitive number, well, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to get you that. Maybe this is an upgrade, maybe it's not. I mean, judging by the surface area, there is a drastic difference, but obviously the thickness and core size for the Evo 8s should definitely help out. And the thing is, you're trying to gain from an intercooler upgrade more efficiency in the fact that you're not going to blow couplers off if you have too much boost. Obviously, cooling, if you bring down the intake air temps, that's going to transpire into more efficiency. So if you're looking for more benefits, a quick Google search will yield that. This is what we have. We'll go ahead and throw it on the car, and if anybody's interested, I will be selling this Evo 8 intercooler that I won't be using, and of course this original one if anybody needs it. Hit me up, weakestofweeks@gmail.com. Link is in the description if you're interested in that. It's going to be kind of interesting to get this pushed back, but also find a way to mount this, as I'm realizing this mount was designed to go on the intercooler, which is obviously in between here, which used to be in between here, and that's now not the case. But for now, I'm gonna kind of caress this back into place, and you have these aluminum lines, and if you just kind of force this back, you're likely to bend it at the actual condenser. But what I want to do is kind of mold the lines a little bit, holding it from behind. I'm going to push the line from the front and hopefully kind of bend this line that's at a 90 kind of a little bit closer. tough to capture this all on camera, but basically what I ended up doing was cutting off these 3 tabs at the bottom of the Evo 8 intercooler. I maneuvered it into the space here, and it's getting tight real quick. And what I'm going to do is drape this upper core support back into place and figure out this top mount for the intercooler. This looks like it should work out pretty good. So we're looking at possibly utilizing this mount. I likely need a spacer. Don't hate me, but I spent a lot of time off camera making some bracketry to make all of this stuff work. So the first one is right there up in the center. This bracket, I ended up doing a riv nut in this upper core support piece right there. There's already an existing hole. I just wallowed it out and put a riv nut in there. Made this aluminum bracket that attaches to the factory portion of the Evo 8 intercooler. I have a rubber isolator in here. And because it's riv nutted, you don't have to worry about a nut on the back side, so I just have 2 bolts there that will hold the majority of the weight of the intercooler. As far as the AC condenser and radiator and stuff, with the core support flipped up, you can get a better look at how I built this bracket. Definitely not elaborate by any means, but I just used some of this angled channel 1/16 inch aluminum. Pretty cheap at my local hardware store, but all I ended up doing was notching it out to clear the metal of the radiator, utilizing a factory bolt there. Same thing on this opposite side, notched, utilizing the factory 8mm bolt. And then I just bent the original brackets to the AC condenser in a 90°. That way it sits on top of this. Probably can't see it, but there's actually some rubber in between this aluminum and the AC condenser, as well as on the top there. And then I ended up putting a riv nut right there. That way you don't have to worry about a nut that's hard to get to underneath there, but it's pretty clean. I originally wanted to have something higher up here because I don't like the idea of blocking any of the airflow, but kind of is what it is. If I were to do a bracket here, I didn't really want to drill into the body. I don't know if the headlight would clear if I had the end of a riv nut sticking out here. I wasn't quite sure. So I just went the simplistic route and utilized some original holes. And it's actually very sturdy. And where I'm at right now is underneath how to figure out the mounting of this. I came up with kind of an interesting solution. What I will utilize are these factory brackets here. So these would have held the AC condenser in, go in something like that, one on each side. So I'm popping these off, sanding all of this stuff down because I no longer need that. And this is pretty much the finalized product of it. So what I'm gonna do is take one, put it right there, another one in there like that. And of course this will be sanded down, so you can see it's pretty well smooth and flat. And then this intercooler is actually going to be pushed back, so it's going to be like pinched in between here. Ideally I should have left the factory tabs here because it would have caught that and kept it in place better, but I'll probably use some epoxy, and then whenever I do these brackets going up to this crash bar, I'll make sure to have this pushed back that it pinches this in place, but that way it keeps some space in between this so it's just not vibrating. That will keep stuff securely in place, and then I'll prevent any chafing of this metal and wearing holes into things that shouldn't have it. We're now on a mounting. Here are some brackets. I know I didn't show any of the bracketry, but it's very tedious, and I honestly didn't know what route I wanted to go. I made a couple different revisions, but here is that top piece, that angled aluminum. And because this bracket is aluminum and I won't be painting it, because I think if I paint it, it's going to stand out more. The aluminum, I guess it is shiny, but it blends in a little bit more. But because I have some original steel hardware with the aluminum, I have some nylon spacers, riv nut gun that I purchased here. If you don't have one, click the description and pick one up. They are a wonderful thing to have when you're making brackets like this, but I have some stainless steel rivets in there. So that secures the top of the AC condenser, the bracket up top the core support. Right here I did, again with some riv nuts, nothing fancy or extravagant. And then I have these lower ones. This one will mount on this side like that. This one will be on the driver's side right over here. I have a bunch of just miscellaneous hardware, and I actually incorporated an extra riv nut in here which will hold up this power steer and cooler line, something like that. But you'll see it once I install everything. I have the original rubber grommets. I just put different sleeves in here. That way the M8 bolts fit nice and snug inside of there. But yeah, just a bunch of random hardware that I cobbled together. I have 6 mils for the power steering cooler bracket. I have 8 mils for the actual intercooler right there. And then up inside the crash bar, I did some additional riv nuts. That is a 10 mil. And then coming over here, there's another 10 mil. Here's that low Mile Evo 8 intercooler I modified, again by lobbing off these 3 brackets at the bottom. I didn't mess with this bracket. I did not mess with this bracket other than just kind of spraying it with a quick lick of paint. This bracket I modified just ever so slightly. If you can see, I ground down this section here because there is a union right here that's rather big for the power steer and cooler line. So I just wanted some extra clearance for that. But now we're ready to maneuver this thing in behind this crash bumper and in front of the AC condenser. Definitely a good time for 12 hands. Cut some rubber strips, and I'll basically have it in behind the intercooler, in between the AC condenser and the intercooler, but just like this, one on each side. Here's what I used for my bracketry. I have the 1/16 aluminum 3/4 inch angle for the top, and then some flat bar steel 1/8 thick for these lower brackets. With moving that AC condenser from the very frontmost to pushing it back now in the middle, all these lines easily bend. However, you definitely want to make sure and take some time, make sure things aren't chafing together. This top AC line going to the compressor becomes very close to the serpentine belt, the power steering pump, right in here. So this line I bent more towards the radiator just a smidge. There's lines that go in between here, make sure they don't chafe on one another. And then you can see in here there's plenty of space. There will be some movement, but nothing is rubbing on anything. And then one thing I didn't show is moving this piece that's part of the AC lines more forward, because that creates more room for this hose that goes down and connects to that charge pipe. So where this is originally is down much lower and straighter, and it's impossible to get a good route to the intercooler with this still being in its original spot. So I used some factory mounting holes on the radiator right here, and I sandwiched it with 2 pieces of plastic, and then did a hose clamp and added some rubber. So again, no metal was chafing on anything, and it's very sturdy now. Intercooler is fully installed with the DO88 charge pipes. Click up top here for that video. But man, look how amazing all of this looks. The charge pipes, all of this stuff. I mean, this is extremely sturdy. It's not even budging. Underneath here, looks like it could almost have been like this from the factory. And I love how I was able to incorporate the power steering hose connectors into the bracket so it holds everything nice and in place. Everything is clearance, so nothing is going to rub. I mean, I paid a lot of attention to detail here to make everything work out. Looking pretty good. So now it's time to throw the front bumper on and fire the vehicle up. So the certified Saab mechanic said everything was buttoned up on the car. It was good to take it for a test drive, but she wanted to go on a detour to the park to really test the car out. What do you think, Prudence? Does it live up to all your expectations? More efficient, quicker boost? So if something were to fail, it definitely would have happened either to the drive here to the park or while the car has been idling here in this heat. It is very hot. But to show you the finalized installation, let's check it out. AC is blowing ice cold. That verifies that I did not puncture any holes into the AC condenser. You really can't see much in there. More down here. DO88 coupler peeking out just a little bit, and of course those beautiful mandrel bent powder coated charge pipes. Everything is working perfectly. I could definitely tell the car is picking up boost quicker. I don't necessarily say the car is faster, but it definitely seems like the RPMs are a lot less staggered. It's more linear. Overall, I think it was well worth the upgrade, well worth the time. So with that being said, if you like the video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Consider subscribing. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop a comment down below. Like I said earlier in the video, if you're interested in either the extra Evo 8 intercooler that I have or the original intercooler to this vehicle, hit me up at weakestofweeks@gmail.com and we can work out a deal on getting that out to you. I appreciate you watching, and I'll catch you friends next time.